Hello, I'm Steven.
And I'm Aaron.
And we've just seen
Hurry
Hurry Up
Up
Tomorrow,
Tomorrow.
new film that's out in theaters right now, starring The Weeknd, Jenna Ortega, and Barry Keoghan, and it is directed by Trey Edward Schultz. So the previews to this movie did look interesting to me. It had all of the elements that I like. It seemed like it had indie sensibilities, emphasis on attractive cinematography. It looked like it had a grungy criminal element. I did not realize that it was starring The Weeknd because I've only heard some songs from him. I've never really paid attention to him physically outside of his cameo in Uncut Gems. So I didn't know this was a movie about The Weeknd where he plays The Weeknd.
Was he in Cut Gems?
Yeah, he had a cameo.
I couldn't remember. Well, I am decently familiar with The Weeknd, and I knew from the trailers and previews that this was him. I didn't realize that it was kind of like a companion piece tie-in to his brand new album he just dropped.
Yeah, which
recently.
is nothing new. This has been done before, and it's been done brilliantly in the past with Pink Floyd The Wall.
Yeah, and even like it's not a great movie, but it's kind of achieved cult status. But Purple Rain from Prince.
Yeah, this did remind me of Purple Rain in a number of ways, only this one was so much worse.
So, what is Hurry Up Tomorrow about?
It's about The Weeknd's girlfriend breaks up with him and he's really sad. And then another girl who has some sort of family issues is running away. And then they meet each other at a concert. And then they hit it off for one night. And then their relationship quickly becomes obliterated because they're both selfish, destructive people. And it's really hard to say what else happens in this movie without giving away because really not much at all happens.
Yeah, we will have a spoiler section, I think, near the end of this to go over kind of the third act of this movie, because that's really the only place where any kind of story or evolution or ideas come into play.
I realized very quickly that I was setting foot in a trap. Well, first of all, you told me to go into this blind. I had only watched previews and I had no intention of really looking up anything about it, but I was kind of surprised that you asked me specifically to just not look at anything about this. Why was that?
So, like 2 days ago, I was on, I think it was Twitter, and I was just scrolling and I saw a clip of The Weeknd acting in this movie opposite Jenna Ortega, and it was really, really terrible. I also scrolled further and saw a separate post that somebody said like the movie opened to like a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I was like, this movie seemed kind of interesting, but it also stars The Weeknd, and he's become kind of an odd character in popular music and culture lately for some of the decisions he's been making and some of the creative endeavors he's gone on. With his last big one being the failed television show The Idol.
Yes.
So I was like, is this really going to be like a big vanity project for him where he tries to show off his range as an actor, as a musician, as a writer, as a producer, filmmaker? So I wanted you to go in not knowing the quality level of this or, anything that had been shared online so you could kind of get the raw experience.
The answer to that question is yes, by the way. This was a colossal vanity project.
Yeah, it's pretty clear from the first frame of the movie where it's just a barrage of colors and sound, like ethereal noise. And then when we finally get to see Abel Tesfaye, The Weeknd in the movie, he's staring directly into the camera as close as you can possibly get. And he's doing vocal warm-ups where he's vibrating his lips directly into the camera, and it looks and sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, he's doing the thing where you blow air through your lips like a horse, only more high-pitched and more ridiculous.
Yeah, so immediately I was put off by this.
Me too. That was a weird way to open this. And we saw this on the biggest screen we could find, and so to have this movie open with The Weeknd's head on a screen matching the size of his ego was quite impressive.
Yeah, I was talking to a coworker just the other day. We were kind of talking about customers and then, society and culture. And one of the things I said was one of the least attractive qualities that I find in people are inflated senses of self-importance.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking about that the whole way through this. It's like, man, The Weeknd really thinks that he's like the greatest thing ever, or he seems to think he is, or he wants to like desperately prove that he is. This is like the most egomaniacal, self-important, self-indulgent project I've seen in a very, very long time.
And it's so weird because kind of like Prince in Purple Rain, where his character is a colossal dick with no likable traits. That's very similar to the character that The Weeknd plays in this movie. He plays a fictional version of himself. That's the thing that separates this from Purple Rain. Prince is basically playing Prince, but his character is unnamed and he's called the Kid. It's like a semi-autobiographical thing. This guy is very specifically called Abel, which is his real name, and his stage persona is The Weeknd, which that's how I realized it. I didn't know his name was Abel in real life, so there was a scene where somebody picked up a pamphlet and it said The Weeknd, and I was like, did I just read that right?
Yeah. So, kind of like what you're talking about, like, if this is going to be a big vanity project about, you as an artist, it's both kind of bold and also extremely strange to portray yourself in such a horrible fashion.
Yeah, at numerous points throughout the movie, I was wondering, I don't know if this is bold of him to portray himself in this way, if this is like sincerity on his part, like if he's using this film as a sort of therapy, kind of like how Shia LaBeouf did when he made that movie Honey Boy, which was
Honey
much
Boy.
better.
Yeah.
Or if this is just The Weeknd not realizing how awful he comes off in this, because his character is obsessive, selfish, narcissistic,
Yeah,
egomaniacal. Did I say obsessive?
He's a alcoholic, drug abuser, just extremely flawed and self-destructive and destructive to like pretty much everything and everyone around him kind of character.
Like the first 15 or so minutes of this movie had me baffled because there's nothing happens. Like we learn two things in the first 15 minutes, which is that The Weeknd's girlfriend has broke up with him and he's really sad about that.
Well, three things. He has an ex-girlfriend that broke up with him. He's sad about it. And also he's having some problems with his voice. Like
Yeah.
He's having some medical issues.
That's true. Which is possibly psychological. Like the trauma of him breaking up with this lady is causing him to lose his voice, and it's having an effect on him, and he can't perform. And his manager, played by Barry Keoghan, is trying to force him to no. You got to go out there. You got to make that money. He's an enabler.
Yeah. So this is kind of the first big problem with the movie is that pretty much every scene is circular in nature, in that there's really only one or two things that need to be communicated in a scene, but they communicate it like 10 or 15 times.
Yeah.
It just repeats itself. And the opening of this movie is done twice.
Yeah.
And it's the strangest thing I've ever seen. Like, you open with him backstage doing his warm-ups. He's getting ready to go on stage. He performs for the audience. He's got the manager. There's the drama with the ex-girlfriend. And then we're just kind of hanging out for a minute. We're partying. The Weeknd is doing drugs and drinking and going out, all over town partying. And we get some, like, flashes to Jenna Ortega's character, who is introduced by burning down what we assume is her family home.
Yeah. Yeah. Her name is Anima, by the way.
Yes, which I will bring up later for a very particular reason. And then they do it all over again. They show him backstage warming up. They get him ready for the show. They even have him like perform the same song because it's another show. He's doing the same set list.
That really threw me when he performed the same song. I was just like, really? This is sort of a semi-musical and you don't have another song you can perform?
Yeah, it's very odd, but this is where his voice finally breaks, which starts to send him into the tailspin. And this is also where Jenna Ortega and The Weeknd first come into contact because she decides to attend this concert where Abel's voice goes. They lock eyes. He storms off backstage. she somehow gets backstage,
Yeah.
and then they kind of escape together into the night, unseen by, the security and his manager.
It's like the kid in Apollonia.
The problem with this is that this happens 50 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
50 minutes of wasted time. We get 2 first acts, which are almost identical. You could have completely chopped off the first one and just started here. But instead they do it twice and take up way too much screen time on nothing.
So much of this could have been streamlined.
No development for these characters. We don't really know anything about Jenna Ortega's character.
Yeah, other than she has some vague issues with her mother that never go explored.
Not until the third act.
Yeah.
And then kind of like after their night together, we're in the third act. There really is no middle of this movie.
Yeah, that's true. This film has a bloated third act. So yeah, what happens is after Jenna Ortega or The Weeknd and Anima, they meet up and they go out. They have a night on the town. They go to like the Santa Monica Pier and they get on like the rides and go on the Ferris wheel. And The Weeknd is his attempts to portray euphoria and happiness are really amateur. It's pretty funny to watch.
He just has a blank expression and occasionally shows his teeth through this like half-hearted smile.
And then they go to a hotel, and something really funny happened at our screening. They go to a hotel. Presumably, they probably make love, or at least, just like spend the night together. And then an audience member got up out of his seat and walked away. And as he was walking out of the theater, The Weeknd said, "Don't ever leave me."
Yes, this did happen.
That guy did not come back.
Yeah.
So he did indeed leave The Weeknd.
Life is funny how it works out that way sometimes. After this, the movie kind of takes a turn into becoming a pseudo remake of Misery.
Yeah, it's weird. The very next day, The Weeknd, they wake up, they have breakfast, and The Weeknd is suddenly, I guess he's distant, and he's like, he can't keep his head out of his phone. I'm assuming he was still obsessively checking text to see if his girlfriend was responding, but he's trying to pretend like, oh, it's my manager, it's Barry Keoghan. And he becomes aggressive, and then...
Jenna Ortega is trying to flee the city because she has committed a crime in the intro, and she does make contact with her mother. And then The Weeknd's next stop is in Australia, so she sees this as an opportunity to go with him, to escape with him, and
take me with you.
Exactly, and he's not for that. He's like, you know what, I'll put you on my phone, and I'll call you, and we'll see where this goes. But again, just very distant and aggressive. And then she calls him on it for, being toxic and being the way he is. And then she clangs him on the head.
She knocks him out.
Ties him to the bed.
What happens in between her knocking him out and him waking up, though, is a pretty decent dream sequence that I thought did have some haunting visuals. The Weeknd's walking around the city and it's completely vacant. He's totally alone. And then he walks to the hotel. It's empty. And then he gets in the elevator and tries to go up, but the elevator is taking him down. Not so subtle. It takes him all the way down to floor 6, 666. He's in hell.
Yeah.
And then he gets out of the elevator, and the elevator closes behind him, and then he's just left in the dark. The saving grace of this film is that the direction is pretty excellent for the most part, aside from some nauseating camera movements.
I don't know so much about the direction as much like the production design and cinematography.
Yeah, the cinematography is gorgeous. There's some really, really nice shots, particularly in that Santa Monica scene.
Yeah, there's a really, really like nice one where it's like the two of them at the edge of the pier.
Yes.
And then there's water, and then the Ferris wheel all lit up with neon is reflected on the water.
Just the purple and the pink is all reflected in the water. It's a really pretty shot.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that all throughout this, but the problem is like that sometimes the camera work they utilize to create the feeling of like anxiety or fear or whatever it may be going on in Abel's head, it just gets to be a bit much. The camera constantly spinning around and flashing or smearing the visuals across the screen like in a blur or like a ghosted trail of images. It becomes kind of headache inducing and tiresome to watch after a while.
Yeah, I don't usually feel any nausea or a semblance of headache when I watch movies, but there is one moment where everything was happening so fast and so frequently that it did kind of disorient me for a second.
Yeah, and like everything we've said up to this point is not really a spoiler because anything that happens that has any kind of like character development or progression or resolution happens from this point on. The rest of the movie, like the last 35 minutes of the movie, is really the chunk of the movie where anything important happens.
Yeah.
Um,
So are we getting into that, the spoiler section?
well, I mean, first let's kind of just go over like what else doesn't work. So like the performance.
Oh, yes, okay. The Weeknd's terrible.
Abel cannot act.
He's not able to act.
No, the only thing he's about able to do is draw a tear. And
Yeah, and even Hulk Hogan was able to do that in No Holds Barred.
yeah, it's not impressive, in between takes when somebody's, putting chili powder in your eyes and then they turn the camera on you and then you bust out some tears. It's also really odd. I don't know if this is just him acting or if this is like a decision that was made, but it seems like there's a lot of times where he'll conceal his face either behind his hand to look distraught or like something else in the scene. But the whole time I was just thinking like he's covering up his face because the man can't act. He just has like a vacant expression a lot of the times. His performances on stage are like he has no life or charisma to him, which may be part of the point.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Whenever you record like an actor pretending like he's singing, usually what they do is like in order to sell the illusion that they are singing is they do sing along to the recording and then they just, simply mute the audio and just play the real song over it. Because you can tell when somebody is just moving their mouth and lip syncing. And that's what it looked like here. Whenever he was on stage, he was just lip syncing. It did not look like he was really performing. I could be wrong, and maybe he's just got amazing vocal control, but I was not convinced.
Even if you're lip syncing, you can still put on a good performance and show just with like the production or dancing or just really getting into the performance. But he's just lifeless. He has a blank stare on his face. And again, this is probably part of the point because he's having kind of performance anxiety and he's got trouble with his voice to begin with. So I'll kind of, give some of that a pass.
But in the scenes where his character is seriously trying to emote and he has to portray trauma or sadness or anxiety, it's so melodramatic.
Or anger.
Yeah.
There's a lot of anger. It's embarrassing. It's laugh inducing. It's not good at all. He's a terrible actor in this. And it really kind of makes me like him less because this does feel like such a vanity project. And for this to be kind of a project about ego and self-examination and kind of trying to purge yourself of the traits that make you a toxic person, trying to improve yourself. The movie is like all ego and no self-examination whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it's just tough to sit because you're watching this man blow himself up on the biggest screen possible and constantly talk about how important he is, how great his music is, how important he is to his fans and the people of the world and culture. And at a point you have to wonder, like, who's talking right now? Is this, like, the character on the screen or is it the guy producing and starring in this movie?
And the co-writer.
Yeah.
On the brighter side, acting-wise, every scene he's in with Jenna Ortega or Barry Keoghan, you're like, oh, that's what an actor looks like.
Yeah, it's funny because for, like, as much as Jenna Ortega kind of just blankly stares in a lot of the scenes she's in, she has a very expressive face.
Yeah.
She's able to do a lot with her eyes.
And then the third act of the movie, when she gets to go into Annie Wilkes mode from Misery, she does come off like a genuine psycho.
Yeah, she has fun with it. Barry Keoghan is just he's having fun. They got him for a couple weeks or a couple days, and he's just, you know, having fun with this drug-addled, crazy manager character.
Yeah.
That's really all there is.
Yeah, there's really only three major performances here. Three characters, period.
Yeah, nothing else really to talk about in terms of performance. It's Barry Keoghan and Jenna Ortega, like, carrying this thing to the finish line. And then I another positive, the soundtrack. The songs are all, like, Weekend songs.
Yeah.
And produced by his, I guess, writing partner. I can't remember his name right now. But kind of the ethereal score in between. Sometimes it is very pretty sounding and pleasing and nice. Other times it's chaotic and, it gets the point across, even though sometimes it's too much. But the actual, like, new Weekend material in the movie is pretty good.
Yeah.
There's the one song that he plays twice, which sounds like a mix between Thriller and Blinding Lights or whatever it's called. That's kind of another positive aspect of the movie. Anything else nice you want to say about the movie?
No. By the way, this movie sucks. Don't see it. Now we get into spoiler territory.
Do you want to give your score now or wait until after?
I'll wait until after, but I'll put a time code in the description if you want to hear our hear our ratings.
Okay, so the third act of this movie. Tell me what you got out of this third act. What is this movie about?
Well, it seemed like it was supposed to be a third act about accountability and realizing that maybe it's you that's the problem. All of these relationships you've had that fall apart, you are the common link that's destroying them all. But I don't understand how this ending resolves the issue in any way.
What is the purpose of Jen Ortega's character?
That's the thing, because nothing she says is genuine, because she comes off as a colossal hypocrite when you consider the fact that she too is just like a selfish person who has laid a path of destruction. And literally in this climax, she kills Barry Keoghan. So when she kills Barry Keoghan and then she is trying to go back to having her therapy session with The Weeknd, and he does that ridiculous one take singing performance, I just kept thinking, there's a dead man in there.
Okay.
There's a dead man in the other room, dude.
Here's the thing about that, like, did any of that actually happen? I say no. This entire third act...
Oh yeah, that is something I considered. After it's over, the last thing we see is him walk out of the hotel, and then it, like, transitions to him being backstage, and he's getting ready for another performance, seemingly, and he looks shaken. I was thinking, was it all a dream? Are they gonna pull the "it was all the dream" card?
I think this entire movie is The Weeknd or Abel experiencing a psychological break, and it's him confronting, like, the darker sides of his personality, and the Jenna Ortega character is not an actual person. I do not think that the manager actually gets killed. I don't think most of the third act actually happens. It's The Weeknd tied to a bed while Jenna Ortega pokes and prods him to get him to finally
be honest
about who he is and why he is the way he is. Purge, kind of his feelings.
This is basically the trial from Pink Floyd The Wall.
Yes. It ties into, like, the stuff with Jenna Ortega's mother problems, because the song the Weeknd sings in the end of the movie is, like, directed at his mom, like, "Mama, I'm sorry," and he goes over, like, all the things that's wrong with him as a person and as a character when he's finally being honest about himself. And then, yeah, like you said, once he finally does all of that, she kind of stops talking, kind of, fades into the distance, and then we kind of transition into the backstage area.
Yeah, because she does disappear and never comes back.
Yeah, we don't see or hear from her again. And her name, like you said earlier, is Anima, and I was like, that's not a normal name. There has to be a reason for this. And just, like, looking up dictionary definitions of it, Anima in psychology is the feminine part of a man's personality. Or historical philosophy, the soul, especially the irrational part of the soul, as distinguished from the rational mind. So, there is like a really interesting idea, I think, at the heart of this movie. And that's what makes it so frustrating, is because the Jenna Ortega character is such a red herring that without even knowing that extra information, just watching the movie, I pretty much knew, like, there's no way this character is actually a real character that exists in this world, because she commits these crimes and gets away, with everything she does. She's self-destructive, just like him. She's got mommy problems. She kills the guy, the manager, in the end of the movie. We never really developed this character or learned anything else about her. She just kind of is there. Even when she escapes backstage, gets past security, it's like, this wouldn't happen.
Yeah, this does make a lot of sense, and it does recontextualize that third act for me. When Jenna Ortega kills Barry Keoghan, it's basically in his mind. The Weeknd is killing the enabling part of his brain, the part that's telling him to do all these things. The sensible part, Jenna Ortega, that wants him to be honest, is killing that part of his brain. So it's not literal, it's all in his head. Yeah, that can be very interesting, and for the record, the concept of this movie is not a bad one. It's just really badly executed.
Yeah, that's kind of my problem, is like, when all is said and done, I was like, man, you kind of were onto something here, and you almost had something. And I really like the idea of taking such an egomaniacal character, like such a self-obsessed person and self-destructive person, and forcing them to kind of confront themselves in that way. But there is so much wasted time, so much misdirection.
So many circular conversations.
Yeah, the entire third act, like, all this conversation really, like, all the characters really say in it is, you need to talk to me. You need to tell me the truth. I can't do that. You need to talk to me. I can't do that. Please talk to me. I can't do that. And they just repeat themselves over and over and over again.
God, one of the earliest examples of that, not to veer too far off, was at the beginning when The Weeknd is like all distraught over his girlfriend breaking up with him. He's like crouched down up against a wall, and Barry Keoghan is trying to get him to perform it. He basically just keeps saying, do something, over and over again. Come on, boy, you got to go out there. Come on.
Come on, you're my brother, man.
I love you.
Go out. I love you. You need to go out there for these people. And then he's the one that's pumping up Abel's head with all this stuff about, you're a god to these people. You mean the world to them. Like, your music matters. But again, in that third act, like, the sense of self-importance comes across more than the self-examination, because they're like, Jenna Ortega plays The Weeknd's music for him.
Yeah.
And she's like explaining the music to him, and like, there's almost a good idea here, because you're trying to get this guy like back in touch with the things that are important, and how he's expressing himself and how he's letting his feelings out, but you're not doing enough of the examination of the character. Like, it's all ego on screen, and it gets to be frustrating, because you're like,
the way she describes the songs to him, also, she tries to make it sound more profound than it actually is.
Yeah.
That was kind of frustrating.
Yeah. You're really making me not like you in real life, because it feels like such an ego trip. And I know that's not the intention, but that's definitely the way it's executed here. Just, he portrays himself as like the most horrible character, and they don't really explore who he is and why he is enough to justify the character we spend 90% of the movie with.
They really should have done what Alan Parker did in Pink Floyd The Wall, and just had a different actor play this character.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably even still maybe give him a name that's reminiscent of The Weeknd, and he has the attributes of the Weeknd, but not have him actually be the Weeknd, because Roger Waters wanted to play himself in that movie, but I think it was the director who vetoed it on the grounds that he wasn't a good enough actor, and that was the right call.
Yeah, another movie I was thinking about quite a bit while watching this was Vox Lux
I did think of that a few
with
times.
Natalie Portman, because it's kind of similar idea. She's a pop star who with a very traumatic past, who grows up in the industry and eventually has a daughter of her own, and she's got kind of her manager character or assistant, whoever, and it kind of explores like a lot of similar ideas, the idea of fame and
Yeah.
ego, and what creates these people and how they deal with them or evolve from them.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that. That was a much better movie.
Yeah, but there it felt like a more fully fleshed out, realized character. In here, it's the total opposite. We get just this big vanity project from one of music's like biggest stars right now. It's like, does his head really need to be inflated even more?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the critic, but I did read somebody's review who said that this is an ego stroke of monumental hubris. And that is such a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, it's there are some good ideas here, and I wonder if maybe the themes and ideas come across better in the album. Like if you just listen to the album and the
Yeah,
lyrics,
yeah.
maybe the story will come across better. Because here, like I said, it's an hour of nothing, and then like 30 minutes of some ideas that don't get pushed far enough, and definitely not enough to save the movie.
I keep mentioning The Wall, and it's funny. It feels like there's so many like parallels to that. Only that one turned out great, and this one is very feeble. But I remember also thinking in the theater, Jesus, this is the biggest ego stroke I've seen since To Boldly Flee, Doug Walker's masterpiece.
Yeah.
Who went on to review The Wall, and it was the worst video on the internet.
Yeah, and you know what? For like, as cheesy and hokey and kind of dated that like Purple Rain is, Purple Rain has
It has dazzling concert scenes.
it has wonderful like performances. It has some interesting character dynamics that are explored
Yeah.
a little further than this movie.
That movie is deeply, deeply flawed.
But it's an entertaining watch, and it makes sure to give you your money's worth.
Yeah, and that final concert scene, the Purple Rain performance, that kind of fools you into thinking this was actually a decent film.
It also feels like it humbles the lead character
Yeah.
a little more than this movie does.
That is true.
This movie is like, okay, he finally was honest with himself, and he's on the road to hopefully, moving past some of these traumas, but at what cost? We've already suffered through an hour and 15 minutes of one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time to get to like some semi-decent ideas in the third act. Yeah, this was terrible overall. Would not recommend it.
Yeah, definitely don't see it. So what is your final number rating on a scale of 1 to 10?
Kind of like just getting out of the movie, I was kind of leaning towards a 1. I hated it that much. But like I thought about it a little bit, and I started to see some of the ideas he was going for in some of the stuff in the third act that kind of does come together and recontextualize things. But it didn't help very much. I would give this a 2 out of 10. Abysmal.
This was so close to being a 0. The only thing that prevents this from being that is the direction and the talent involved, which is to say the few people in this movie who do have the talent. And that's about it. There's really nothing redeemable about this outside of this, so this is a 1. Yeah, one of the worst films of the year, and that's saying something when you consider the Minecraft movie and The Monkey and Flight Risk.
I think this is easily the worst movie of this year
Yeah,
so far.
I-
I think this is one of the worst movies of this decade so far.
Yeah, I did amend my letterbox earlier today, and I put this right at the bottom. You have to put out a real massive piece of shit to top this year. So, yeah, like we said, to reiterate, terrible movie, don't see it. God awful. don't spend a weekend with The Weeknd.